You know, in the crazy world of combat sports, sometimes all it takes is a single number to completely change the conversation. And well, a new number just dropped that sent absolute shockwaves through the MMA community, and it's kicking off a huge debate about what fair pay in the UFC really looks like.
$15 million. Yep, that's the number that has everybody's head spinning. But here's the kicker. This isn't the purse for some legendary UFC champion. Nope, this is the reported payday for a boxer, Conor Benn, who's fighting under the Zuffa Boxing banner. You know, the sister company to the UFC. A single number like this, it just puts the entire pay structure of MMA right under the microscope.
I mean, just look at this comparison. That $15 million purse for one boxing match, it absolutely dwarfs what even a top-tier, legendary UFC headliner can hope to make for a championship fight. And that massive gap, that's exactly why this whole story has just caught fire.
And you can bet it caught the attention of one of the most respected guys in the entire sport, Max Holloway. He called the number crazy, and for him, this wasn't just a moment of shock. No, it was like a light bulb went off, a moment of clarity, and really a call to action for all of his fellow fighters.
And this right here, this timeline, shows you exactly why Max's voice matters so much on this topic. Back in 2012, his UFC debut purse was a disclosed $6,000. $6,000. Now, just over a decade later, a Zuffa boxer is reportedly making $15 million. The difference is just, it's astronomical, and it gives him all the credibility in the world to talk about this.
Now here's where Holloway's take gets really interesting. He doesn't just point the finger at the promoters. He actually argues that the real core of the problem, it's a lack of solidarity, that the fighters themselves are actually undercutting each other. We cannot be doing that, brother. Those are Max's exact words, and they set up this really specific and honestly kind of painful example of how fighters end up working against their own best interests. So Holloway brings up this crucial moment. John Jones was trying to negotiate that huge super fight with Francis Ngannou, and he asked for $10 million. The UFC basically said, no way. But then, another top contender, Derek Lewis, comes out and publicly says he'd do the fight for just $1 million. In an instant, the entire negotiating ceiling for the best heavyweights in the world just came crashing down. And that right there is the heart of what Max Holloway is trying to say. When one fighter is willing to jump at the chance to do the exact same job for a tiny fraction of the price, it just devalues what every other top athlete in that position can ask for. It completely guts their collective leverage.
But here's the thing about Max. He's not just sitting around complaining, he's actually offering up a solution. He laid out some direct, actionable advice for the younger generation of fighters on how to go out there and negotiate what they're truly worth.
It really all boils down to this one simple but incredibly powerful idea: know your worth. And this isn't just about being confident. It's about doing the research, understanding the real value you bring to a fight card, and then having the guts to actually stand your ground when you're at the negotiating table.
He breaks it down into this simple but genius three-step process. First, you state the number. You say what you believe you deserve. Then, you just listen. You listen very, very carefully to their reaction. Because if they immediately come back and say, yep, perfect, we can do that, you've just made a massive mistake. You sold yourself way too short. And this is the counterintuitive brilliance of his advice. The response you actually want to hear from them is pushback, resistance, maybe even a, quote, F you, why are you asking for this much? Because that friction, that's how you know you found the ceiling. That's how you know you've correctly identified your absolute maximum value in the market.
And it's so important to get this. This is not just Max Holloway's opinion. This isn't some hot take from one guy. This feeling is shared by so many other legends of the sport. I mean, the legend himself, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, was actually hosting this chat with Max, and he couldn't have agreed more about the need for unity. He even brought up a talk he had with Georges St. Pierre, where GSP said pretty much the same thing. The fighters are often their own worst enemies, always putting each other down instead of banding together for the greater good. So, all of this leads to a pretty powerful and kind of tough conclusion. We tend to focus on the revenue split, what the promoters are paying out. But the consensus among these absolute legends of the sport is that the biggest hurdle to getting higher pay might just be the fighter's own inability to stand together.
And that leaves us with this final, really provocative question. MMA is the ultimate individual sport, right? It's built on the idea of one person against another. So in a culture that is so fiercely focused on the individual, Is the kind of collective action that's needed for real change even possible?